Season 8 finally brings me back, for now at least, because it's added a mode that I've always said should be in, but not specifically in this fashion. But a game like Sea of Thieves that already puts players against players as a core part of the game has needed a way to deliberately put players against players for that quick fix of the multiplayer game loop. That doesn't see you sailing around for 3 hours to get into a fight with someone that they started for them to turn and run their grade 5 Reaper into the Red Sea. The problem is, people aren't getting to play this as much as they want because they're being forced into a queue. And as a Brit, even I'm not fond of this kind of queue. Alright, you're not in an actual queue, you're in a time queue, because time is the problem here, and I'll explain why. I have a vendetta against anything that wastes my time, gathering supplies back before the storage crate brought me to the point where only an angry Brit can understand. I had to write a letter, or more so, a tweet. So I wrote a tweet about it to the developers and this is what they said. So you're welcome for that, by the way. I was happy with the change that this brought, until the new season come out, because we're back at being forced to gather supplies and wasting time again to do something in the game. Sailing around in adventure mode and stocking up as you go is different to queuing into a PvP match. It's like those times you log in, you don't even make it to the first island you want to go to, you run into a ship with your basic amount of supplies, and before you know it, you've run out, and they're still constantly attacking you. You make it to their ship and their barrels are bursting because they've spent hours gathering supplies and you've been the unlucky fresh spawn that's crossed their path. They sink you and you respawn, all you lost is time, and it's exactly like that in this new mode, except you're losing rank now too. Let me explain to you why your time is being wasted in this instance though. You're being forced into a queue that you don't realise you're in for this mode you have to queue to get into. You're in a queue for the queue, and it doesn't have a set timer, but you're in a queue because you're waiting to enter the fight, and you can't enter until you gather enough supplies that you think that you need to lose a fight. Listen to that. Not win a fight, but so that you've got enough supplies that if you haven't won by the time that you use all of your supplies, that you've likely already been beaten. An amount that works best for you might not be best for someone else. That could be as little as gathering just from the barrels where you start, or doing a supply run. It's all adding necessary time onto something for a mode that shouldn't even be necessary. I'd class a supply run as looting your starting outpost, buying resources, hitting a skeleton fort, sea fort, and maybe a few other things on the way. You can easily, as a solo sloop player, gather around 300 cannonballs in that time. No one is moaning about how much you can pick up. The bigger issue comes from if someone else does exactly the same thing on their server. They might find islands and forts that haven't already been looted like yours were. So while they racked up 300 plus cannonballs, the sea fort you went to was missing this 150 that you usually get. So what do? Spend another 20 minutes hitting more islands and forts? You've already invested 20 minutes here already. Did you make that 40 minutes before you even get into a match? Or do you join the fight, regret it when you run out of supplies, and then spend another 20 minutes that you could have already spent? It's a skill issue. Just gather more supplies if you don't get enough. It's easy. I can do it. You can do it too. Just rob another ship. It only takes 15 to 20 minutes to get a run of supplies. Just ram them when you run out. Just board them and sail them into the out of bounds. Fuck off. Before we know it, we'll be legitimately suggesting that harsh language is a viable strat.
What the hell are we supposed to use, man? Harsh language?
You know what I take issue with mostly from some of these troll replies? It's people saying that you can resupply within 20 minutes. Like it's okay to spend that amount of time pre-game for the game. Every time. 20 minutes! I'll say it again. Fuck off. There are exceptional circumstances where you'll gather lots more supplies one way or another, but we're talking about the average here. The average being the first time you spawn in and need to resupply already. You're expecting to do a supply run of some kind and expecting it to take a set amount of time. Look at it this way, if you played any other game, you had to wait at least 20 minutes between each match, you'd think your queue was broken, and you'd probably reload the game. You'd probably reload in half that time. Unless it's Tarkov. In Tarkov, you sit in that queue and you hate yourself the whole time because hating yourself in Tarkov is the fun. And a 20-minute queue is 20 minutes where you are richer for a bit longer. Sea of Thieves, however, the fun is playing the game for the content it has. And yes, there are those players who can join on the basic supplies and win all the time. They are few and far between. We're talking about the majority of players. The majority of players that you want to keep playing the game, or you'll end up with queues long enough that you'll be able to spend 20 minutes looting and still not find a match. The other thing you have to remember is that this isn't adventure mode. It is technically fought in adventure mode, but it isn't adventure mode. This is the replacement for the arena to give us that PvP loop on a quicker timer. This, however, is more than that. It's a dedicated matchmaking PvP mode and comes attached with, albeit right now, a basic MMR/ELO system based on wins and losses. And when that system is in a game, Everything that isn't skill should be as balanced as possible. You don't know who you're queuing against and what supplies they're bringing with them. Should you have to fill all of your barrels until they're full? Or should there be some kind of limit? Or Wade Wilson forbid, some kind of balance? This brings us to a war of attrition in every match. I've said this before in other videos and while live on Twitch, it comes down to losing because someone of the same skill level had a little longer to gather or was looked on more favourably by RNGesus at each location they went to loot. You don't give competitive sporks folk more hand eggs to their team than the other team so that they can score more. You don't tell them that if they turn up and bring more with them, that's okay. You say, hey look, here's one hand egg, fight over it and see who scores based on skill. You do this because it's balanced and fair. I don't even think having persistent supplies on your ship between sessions would fix this issue, because there is still the issue of resupplying at some point to take part in this game mode. So how do we fix it? I love that it takes place on an active server, and I love that your customizations are shown and your ship name is shown. I think we keep all of that. So when you queue in and find a match, in the loading screen it swaps your ship to a ship with your customizations on. The ship you're given is stocked the same as the other ship. The supply count in the arena is a good place to start because the amount you're given as a fresh spawn ship just isn't enough, and is why people are having to gather before they play in the first place. Then create a place in the fight area that you can resupply if needed. Give us a static ship like in the arena where you used to hand in the chests that has an abundance of supplies all over the place and could be contested over. Keep the action close because the barrels that spawn right now don't have enough supplies in to make a difference and often separate the ships, adding to the time a match takes to complete. When those barrels aren't sinking immediately, of course. Make most of the supplies that spawn within the fight area cannonballs. Make planks much less common so that the action can continue to push towards the goal of a ship being sunk, as that's the win condition for the fight. There is a little issue here, because if you're invading, you join another person's server and fight them. But you don't always invade someone who is happily sailing around. Most of the time I've noticed that you invade someone who invades you at the same time, and you both spring up out of the water. For that situation this works, but if you join another ship server who didn't invade, they don't get a loading screen. Look, I'm not here to iron out the specifics, just point out that there is a really big problem at the moment with the supplies. If you really need to, give us an extra supply barrel that is locked in normal adventure mode and unlocks during one of these fights. Right before it unlocks, the contents are reset and both ships have the same amount. All the other barrels are locked on the ship for the fight. I'd also like to see some kind of shrinking circle, but I would also like to keep it away from the typical battle royale style of gameplay. So I'm not sure what can be done here, as we're going to see people running around the circle at some point to save their rank, and hoping that they can out-time the other person into making a desperate play or logging off because they're in real life more demanding than the others. The first thing that springs to mind is adding some kind of rogue PvE, but losing to PvE in a PvP fight isn't enjoyable and would add an element of randomness that I just don't think would be balanced. So what about adding in a feature that stops repairing from happening, or increases the flow rate of the holes currently on the ship? Something that is even and balanced on both sides, but if left unchecked would force the fight to the end, but still remains predictable and something that you can counter. That's my thoughts on one of the major problems with the match PvP mode right now in Season 8. It is a lot of fun and already infinitely better than the arena, but it's going to become very tedious to take part, and eventually a running meta will happen and I can see the mode going downhill very fast. In short, please stop wasting our time making us do things that aren't fun in the game that we play for fun, so we can have fun playing the game. Also, disable blunderbombs right now when fired from the cannon. Also, fix hit reg. Then we'd only need about 25% of the supplies we currently need. You won't have to see me make a video like this again. Nice. GG. He wins. Shit. Well, that's me sinking. Does it count? Does he get the win if I've jumped off?